Hi, welcome to my journey. Okay, so I am headed out, to get my hourly dose of going outside and at least walking for 10 minutes. Okay? Got my protein drink here. Like I said, the protein drink is what really keeps me on track. If I drink the protein drink every day, then I'm like, oh yeah, I need to get outside for an hour to get some fresh air, to stay in touch with reality, right? And in this protein drink, I have collagen, fiber, and creatine that I bought from Swanson's website because they give me a good deal. Yes, they do. And they deliver it to my house by mail. Hold on. Okay. Oh, it's kind of cool today. The temperature gauge on the vehicle says 67. Okay. And it's what time is it? It is 12:30, right? On a Sunday, right? So, of course, we're in Sagittarius season, and during Sagittarius season, what do we want to do during Sagittarius season? We want to philosophize. What else do we want to do? We want to travel. We want to travel some long distances. However, if we can't travel long distance, we can travel long distance in our minds. Yes, in our minds. But anyway, I'm getting out. Trying to stay on track. Another he-she. Oh my God, they got so many he-she's lately. I don't even know what world I'm in. What world am I in? And you know what would be great? What would be great is the final outcome of all of these he-she's making this a better place for women, in every woman in general. Okay? I mean, really, that would be the best outcome. And if I have it in my power, that would be the outcome that I would manifest as a result of having all of these trans men, right? That would make it a great place for every single woman on the planet. On the planet. Yeah. So the skies are so blue, right? Earlier today and yesterday, of course, we seen the chemtrails up in the sky. Yes, we did. We seen them. Let me move up here. Ain't too many cars over there by the Mexican restaurant. But there's a lot of cars over there by Scooter's Bar and Grill this beautiful Sunday morning. So, since when did a bar and grill become a religious habit? Right? That they would come Sunday morning to a bar and grill like it's religion. Like I said, To me, this world that we live in is insane. It's insane. And I know a lot of people will say, well, that just happens in your neighborhood, right? But a lot of people are told not to look around. Shh, don't say nothing. And it's like, why are you telling people not to say anything? Why are you telling people not to look around? Right? And don't you think that that's a little deceitful? Right? Deniability instead of accountability? So yeah. We have to stop it. We just have to stop the bullshit. If we have any type of nostalgia for humanity and mankind and humankind, and that's another thing. Why do we say mankind when we should be saying humankind? There wouldn't be no man if it wasn't for a woman. Period. And it's interesting because they can clone almost every animal out there, but they still have to use either a female animal or a woman's womb, right? God, the creator of all things, is not going to allow them to clone on purpose, without the utilization of a female womb. Period. Right? So, men act like women are just being egotistical when they say the power of the womb. Like, are you serious? You think that's egotistical? When every human being on this planet has came through a womb? Name one mammalian that has not come through a womb. If you didn't come through a womb, then you got to be some type of reptilian, right? Where somebody just laid an egg and there you were, growing and thriving. Okay? So it's like a mute subject, but the problem is the message is not getting through to these men's. It's not. Anyway, I want to move on to another subject. Now, I have to try to figure out and make sense out of what just happened in November, right? We do. All of us do, right? The neglect that our government did to its own people, against the wishes of its people, using the people's money against them. Corruption at the highest level, right? So you know what I did. I said, yes, open up Alcatraz and put the diplomatics in there and let judgment begin. Okay? Because that's how I feel. In my world, yep, it already would have happened. They all would be sitting up there right now behind bars talking about, where did we go wrong? What did we do? What didn't we see? Because this was all a plot and a plan and a scheme and shit that they've been doing for years, centuries, okay? And they just kept thinking that it was going to keep going on forever, right? So now that it's not happening forever, they're all shaking in their boots, talking about, forgive me, give me grace, show me mercy. I made a mistake, right? They didn't make no mistakes. They did not. They knew exactly what they were doing, right? And to me, I'd rather have a swift, harsh punishment, right? Like, I'd rather be if I could not just admit and face the consequences, right? And get a swift judgment. That's what I'm talking about, right? When I know I'm wrong, right? I'm like, okay, let me hurry up and get this over with so I can move on to the next, right? What do I need to do? What type of, restitution I need to pay? What kind of punitive damages I need to pay, right? What type of restoration needs to happen, because you also have to change your frame of mind. You can't just disrespect somebody and then throw money at them and say, here. No, you have to change your whole frame of mind, okay, to learn the lesson, okay? But this is not what our society is doing. What our society, and I'm saying our society, but we all know when we say our society, when we say the people, usually, who are we talking about? Men. Because women, they kind of stay silent, right? They don't feel as if they have their First Amendment rights to speak up and speak out on how they're feeling, unless what they're feeling goes along with what men are feeling, right? Because then and there, they figure, okay, well, we said the same thing. Those were one of the most beautiful arguments I had most of all, is when I would listen to somebody say something, right? And I would say the same thing, but using different words. And the debate would go on and on and on until I would just get so, tired and bored of the argument that I said, we're saying the same thing, just in different words. And then they'll be like, what? No, we're not. And then I'll have to break it down, how we're saying the same thing, just using different words, right? Because what the fight was actually about, it was an emotional battle. It was not about the principles. It was not even about the meaning of the words. It was weird and funny as hell, right? Because when you actually show somebody that you are fighting and arguing and saying the same thing except with different words, their look, they're dismayed, right? And of course, if you let them go on and then you turn back around to see what the hell's going on, they have to scratch their head. Like, what the fuck was I doing, right? What just happened, right? And, this is pretty much what is happening on our planet, period. Right? And a lot of times, people are trying to point this out to some of the leaderships of how they will war over territory, only to find out that the warring that they did eventually made the territory not even worth having. Okay? And, we see that in our relationships, where the guys are, being possessive and jealous, and they'll go to like great extremes, right? To try to, capture and hold somebody hostage, who doesn't love them. And yet, one day they wake up and they'll say, my God, the juice ain't even worth the squeeze. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. Oh my God. We got some Mexicans out here with the American flag and the Mexican flag. I think I see some other flags down here. Let's see what other flags we have going. Looky here. Looky here, looky here. I do recognize the Mexican flag. Now, the blue and yellow flag, is that Ukraine? So, they're saying that Trump is the problem because of Project 25. So, I'm going to have to look up and see what Project 25 is. But most of these people out here, they are definitely seniors. They're all old. Fascism. No kings. Okay? So, my thinking is, what is it that they're trying to prove? What is it that they're trying to prove? That's not a debate. That's a bunch of, accusations, name calling, with signs. But at least, they did bring up the fact of, they said Project 25. Now, maybe they're talking about the 2025, booklet that was talked about, before Trump even got into office. However, he got into office and the resistance, what is the resistance doing? Except putting us more in debt, causing more destruction, causing more damage. And here's the thing. Their tactics might be effective if they were actually the rich, right? If they were the rich, but they're not the rich. Wait a minute. Some of them are the rich, okay? And let's be honest. The rich are very debt concentrated, okay? The rich has a very high concentration of debt. Now, the wealthy, they don't have debt, okay? Basically, they have what you would call generational wealth, because that's why we call them wealthy. because they have enough resources that could get passed down for generations. Right? Now, most of the people that even work in the house, right? If you go and you look up or ask AI, how much does somebody make as a representative in the House of Representatives? How much does a member of Congress make? And you will see that the majority of those people make less than $500,000 a year. This is why you need to understand the significance and the importance of not confusing corporate America with the government of USA. They're two different things. Corporate America is big business. Okay? All business. Right? So, now, we all know that we have slicksters, in our family, in our neighborhoods, and, in our environment. We see these slicksters, but we're not a nation that believes in snitching. Even when we see somebody do wrong, right? This is the repercussion of that mentality, that eventually it turns a whole society into corruption. If you're not going to snitch, right, then, witnesses can be taken out. Boom, right? Peace officers can be taken out and nobody's going to snitch. Okay? And y'all might think that that's okay, right? They should have known better because that's the job that they took. That's the risk that they took, right? But you're talking about these are the people that are supposed to maintain the peace, civility in our society, to keep our society civil and safe. Okay? So then when your society starts looking like a jungle, right? It starts looking like a jungle, right? But it ain't, you don't have to be fearful of the tigers and the bears and that sort. You got to be weary about other people. Right? So now you sitting up here trying to figure out, well, what happened? What happened? I just told you what happened. You see the ADD in your brain? The ADD in your brain made you forget what you were just told. The number one thing that America needs to stop doing is they really need to stop drinking. That's the number one thing. It's one thing to drink once a month or once a week, right? But y'all be drinking every day. Y'all be drinking every day. Y'all be drinking 3-4 times a day. Y'all drink more days out of the week than you don't. Right? And the sad part about it is y'all want to believe that drinking is more harmful than if somebody was smoking nicotine or vaping nicotine. I'm like, my goodness. If they should have took anything out off of the market, it should have been alcohol. Because of its addictive nature, 1. 2, it causes people to be uninhibited in the worst way, right? But see, this is our society. Our society are prompted to focus on the wrong thing, right? Because we live in a society of magicians, right? They never let the right hand know what the left hand is doing. And even if you're going to know a particular activity, there's always something going on with the hands behind the back that you don't see, right? They say, look here, but you don't see the hands behind the back and what it's doing. That's a mentality of a magician, right? And let's face it, secrets are basically activities that people know. If it was known, it would be unapproved. Okay? Now, I have heard people talk about, they have a lot of secrets, or secrets is just a part of life. No, it's not. Right? Secrets is basically an omitted lie. It's like lying through omission. Right? Because you don't know if it's a secret. Right? Now, this is one thing that I was listening to also, was the fact that somebody was like, well, they don't know the difference between privacy and secrecy. And I'm like, why don't they know the difference when all you had to do was just go ask AI? Pick the AI of your choice. There's several different AI programs out there, and you can pick one. And you don't have to worry about whether or not you accept the answer, but at least you were given an answer, and it was supposedly an answer that was objective. The answer was at least objective. It wasn't subjective. And when it does give subjective answers, it would tell you that this population, feels this way, and that population feels that way, and therefore that's an admission that the information is subjective because of people having differing perspectives on a lot of subjects. So, yeah. Then, on the other side of the lake, we have all of these people who are very tranquil, right? They're out here walking. They're out here walking their dogs. They're out here jogging. They're out here riding their bikes. They're out here trying to get healthy. They're not trying to protest and riot in the streets. Right? I would think that if you were going to protest, it wouldn't be like in the streets. You would want to protest on the doorstep of your House of Representatives. That's where you would want to protest. Right? Or at your government offices. Your city government offices. Right? Why would you sit up here and organize a protest in the middle of the street? And I don't even think they had a permit. I think they just wanted to make an organized, protest, but the problem, here's the biggest problem that the Democrats don't realize. That the Democrats had achieved significant population by joining up with liberals. Otherwise, there just wouldn't be enough Democrats, right? What the Democrats refuse to understand, that when they joined up with the liberals, they joined up with criminals, they joined up with rebels, they joined up with dysfunctional people, right? And these are the people that we're trying to explain to the Democrats, that these people have mental illnesses. Right? And even if they don't have mental illness, then they definitely have problematic short-sightedness and impulsivity. Right? ADD, not thinking before, jumping. Okay? So, yeah. Like I said, sure, you can protest in front of a grocery store if you want to. However, how effective is that to, protest, right? Because here's the thing. The way that those people were protesting on a street corner, right? It was at the same level, of beggars, right? You know how beggars are when they're standing on these intersections with a sign talking about feed me, or maybe some of them, they really stopped lying, right? At one time, they used to say, will work for food, but they stopped those signs. They don't even have those signs anymore. No, you don't even see them. Will work for food. No. Now they just want cash. Right? And here's another thing that was downloaded to me. Right? A lot of you keep saying that cash is going to be needed in the future, right? And it was downloaded to me that nope, the government is not going to accept cash, right? I mean, I watched a lot of Westerners, right? And, these Western movies used to show that the Union, would bury their money, and, put their money in mattresses and just hide the money everywhere that they wanted to hide the money. But here's the thing, if the government wants to, the government can change the currency. Period. Our government can change the currency, and that way nobody can have residual money out there. And a lot of people are like, well, you can invest in gold. What good is gold if you're not a manufacturer? Matter of fact, what good is gold in a society where you can't even wear gold? You can't even utilize gold, right? Back in the day when they used to sit up there and, utilize gold, they utilized gold because, they had the ability to manufacture it, right? And I know some of you think that you're real smart sitting up there talking about all you have to do is melt it down. All you need to do is have a little pot, and melt it down. But like I said, what good is gold if you live in a society that you can't wear gold? Well, you could just put it in the safe. What good is gold when you can't wear gold and it's sitting up there in your safe? You can't eat gold. No, you can't. You cannot eat it. Right? And that made me even think about how these preppers was like, oh yes, you can extend the expiration date of food, and you can package it so that you'll have food that you can use as bartering with other people for other things. And I'm like, oh my God, don't tell me now they want to sit up here and try to revert back to the barter system? Right? The barter system is so obsolete that the barter system is now charity. Okay? The barter system is what we now call, well, that's just charity. That's how obsolete the barter system is. If I'm wrong, you can tell me I'm wrong. Just do it in the comments. And do it politely, okay? And do it politely, because I'm going to tell you, you better be careful with the words that you say to me. Okay? So, it's a beautiful Sunday afternoon. It seems like there's a lot of people out here, riding around. And why we out here riding around here in Texas? Right? Because gasoline is under $3 a gallon. That's why we out here riding around. Here's the cheapest thing we could do is get out and ride in our vehicles. Right? And not to mention, I don't think the kids are going to school next week. So you could best believe that a lot of these men are going to be out here riding around because they don't know how to stay at home with their family. They don't. They have prime time this whole week. Kids are going to be out of school this week where they can actually bond with their family, their children, their mate. And we shouldn't even be using that word anymore. Like I said, if somebody says that you're their mate, that's not a contract. It's just not a contract. And then you can put it down there in the description also, right? What type of contract is a verbal contract, and what actual words did they use? Because if somebody was to tell me, I'm your boyfriend and you my girlfriend, I don't see that as being a contract. And you definitely can't take that into court. You just can't. Now, I did see this one guy who's a content creator, and I think he's with a Hispanic girl, and he went down to Mexico to have a stem cell operation. Okay? And he had been referring to this girl, well, not the girl, this woman. He has been referring to this, let's call her a lady. Well, let's call her a woman. He had been referring to this woman as his wife, but stating that he has anxiety about their upcoming wedding. I'm like, oh my God. Throughout the video, you've been my wife, my wife, my wife. Y'all are like having sex and whatnot, basically living together, doing YouTube together, and, leaving the country together, and, the emotional manipulativeness of calling somebody your wife, even though you're not married, is disrespectful. It is just plain disrespectful. Because if a man, let me tell you something, if a man is going to sit up there and call me his wife, and we're just dating like boyfriend, girlfriend, I already know this is as good as it gets, baby. And a piece of paper would just mean it's just going to get worse from there. It's going to go down from there. It ain't going to get no better. Right? It ain't. Now, he's expecting some type of reward because men operate in, in terms of leverage, right? And he's thinking, well, if I marry her, she's going to have to step up her game, once we're married. I'm serious. Mark my words. Put it down there in the description box if after you got married, you didn't understand that the man had leveraged the marriage license to make a demand that once he does actually give you the paperwork, that you were supposed to provide him with something other than what you had provided him all along, even though all along he had been calling you his wife. Okay? Okay. I love these talks. I did not go to and walk down there at the waterfront. There's too many people down there. There's too many people. I'm an introvert. you know. So I'm probably going to walk somewhere else. Because like I said, it's not enough just to get out for an hour, but I also have to walk 10 or 15 minutes, you know, for it to be an adequate therapy, right? So I was tempted to go home. Yes, I was. I was tempted to get going back home. But, you know, thankfully, drinking the protein drink made me realize, oh, I haven't gone for a walk yet. You know, I still need to go on my walking routine. So, getting back to what I was saying, back in November, my emotions was so high. They were so high, right? And the fact that, you know, the only food that I could afford was bread, beans, and starches, and sugars. Sugars are probably the cheapest thing that you can buy, right? But it's horrible for people who have like an addictive personality. Okay, so let's just say for the month of November, I went ahead and I gained 10 to 15 pounds just in the month of November, even though I was doing good. I was doing good, right? Because I was candying pecans. I was buying, you know, vanilla bark and milk chocolate to coat the pecans. I had problems making the caramel exactly how it should be. Also, you know, making caramelized popcorn. Oh my goodness. You know, sugar's not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than bread. And what I mean is, you can get more calories with sugar than you can with the same amount of bread. Okay? So, I am thinking what I need to do, what I really need to do is to either go on a liquid protein diet for a week. That's what I need to do. Just to take off some of this weight that I gained during this emotional eating that I was doing in November, right? Because tensions were extremely high, right? And also, you know, I'm in the front lines of the spiritual, you know, warfare that's going on. Okay? So, the emotional eating was strong to the point where, you know I have gained at least a minimum of 10 pounds in a month. That's a lot of weight fast. Okay? And the best way to, you know, deal with weight that you had gained real fast is to try to lose it real fast. Because if you don't lose it real fast, it's going to be hell trying to get rid of it at all. Much less, you know, trying to get rid of it slowly. So yeah, I've been thinking, should I do the liquid protein diet? Should I try to do a carnivore diet? I can't just do just a water fast. I cannot. That's just the one thing that if I do something like that, I'll be one of these people out here hangry, right? I'll be out here hangry with an attitude and aggressive and ready to pop off at the slightest. You could look at me wrong because, yeah, hangry. And that could be, part of some people's problems out there. I'm not saying that I'm the only one that has that problem, because I doubt it. I believe a lot of people out here who are hangry, don't realize that they're angry. They're angry because they're hungry. They're lacking some nutrition. They're lacking some calories. Okay? So that's one of the things that I was thinking about. I was thinking that, it would be nice, because it seemed like November just sabotaged my whole diet. Okay? And that's because it was so stressful to me that I was emotionally eating. Okay? But, I don't have to stay there. I could combat it, like I said, with some type of change in my diet. And because it's stemmed from emotional eating, I feel like a carnivore diet would help me with my emotions, because the meat would provide me, the B vitamins that also go with healing, our emotions. Okay? I don't believe I have any B vitamins at the house. I could go look. I could look. And I think mushrooms have B vitamins. And oh my goodness, I felt so bad for some of these people out here who are getting gypped, right? How are they getting gypped? They're getting gypped because you have people who are pretending to employ them and give them a remote position, and then telling them that they'll get paid in 2 or 3 weeks, and then when it's time for them to get paid in 2 or 3 weeks, the website that they had been working on, it would be shut down, right? Kind of like the same way that like when my mom used to go crazy, over the fact that somebody would tell her, do these surveys and they could, make X amount of dollars, right? And she would do all of these surveys and, and then at the end, or at completion, something would happen to her connection, right? So it was like they had, it was like they had a program, or that released a virus and refused to give them any type of administrative access or authority to access, right? And the worst part about it was she kept doing them, right? And the sad part about it was when she would get a hold of a virus that would actually contaminate, her laptop or her computer, right? That was just sad. It was just like, well, what's wrong with your computer? Because my mom would always be online, and you could always find her online. And when you couldn't find her online for a while, you had to call her up. Hey, what happened to you? I'm used to seeing you online. What's going on? And that's where you would hear, something's wrong with my computer, or my computer's dead, and stuff like that. And it's just sad. It's just sad that people would do that. And again, like I said, when I say people, generally people means men or women that follow wicked men, right? And why do I call them wicked? Because when we get to a point where people are sitting up there saying to be nice is a weakness, to be caring is a weakness, right? And you would think, okay, it can be a weakness, right? But then you have to really understand what these people are saying. What they're saying is you're weak to somebody that's predatory. They're not saying, oh, you're soft, you're nice, you're loving, you're caring, you give, more than you should. That's not what they're saying. To these people who don't think in terms or through the eyes of a predator, they don't see that. What they're saying is you're vulnerable to a predator. But that's exactly what they're saying. When they say, oh, you're too caring, or you're too loving, or you give too much, or, you shouldn't be so compassionate, what that person is actually saying to you, because they have the eyes of a predator, whether they are hunting at the time or not, they still have the eyesight of a predator, right? When somebody sits up there and says they see what you don't see, you need to wonder, what is it are you seeing? And you can best believe it's probably something very negative. You have to have a negative frame of mind in order to be able to incorporate that negativity as part of your thought processes. To have it ingrained into your central processing unit. I'm not talking about just identifying negativity. I'm talking about having it incorporated into your central processing unit of thinking. Right? And this is what our society will do. Our society will then blame the victim for being naive by calling them dumb. You're dumb. You're stupid. Right? you're naive, right? But you have to understand, we have let's just say 70 to 80% of middle class and lower class families that are dysfunctional. They're just dysfunctional, right? And that's why a lot of them are sitting up here. No, they're not dysfunctional. You're doing profiling. What? You're one of the most predictable, Ooh, I like the color of that car. It is multicolored. It changes colors. Purple, pink, and oh, it's just beautiful. I want that. So yeah. So, and this is something that, I have noticed that has happened, when it comes to a lot of men, right? A lot of men will sit up here and live in a dysfunctional environment. And men are typically very dysfunctional behaving towards each other, right? We didn't know the type of games that they played when they're, amongst each other in the locker rooms, spending the night with each other, hiking in the woods or the mountains, right? Until you see movies like Brokeback Mountain. But anyway, until, you start listening, to family members, who will say, that a half brother is not admitted into the house because that half brother had sexually assaulted his little half brother. I mean, what do you say to that? What do you say to that? Like, wow. That's all you can say is like, wow. Right? So, I'm going to tell you, a situation like that has happened in my family, right? Because I have a lot of half brothers in my family. And what had happened is the baby brother reported to my stepmother, his mother, that a half brother had sexually assaulted him. Right? And when the report came out, the mother was protective and has said, no, you cannot come to this house under no circumstances. Now, this brother, he did try, right? He came to the house and he was outside on the street, hoping that, he would receive, I guess, compassion, sympathy, grace and mercy to let bygones be bygones. But that never happened. That never happened. Right? It was like, we don't care if, you know, you have complete supervision of everybody in the house, right? You are not going to be allowed in the house, period. And all I could do was say, wow, you know, I don't know what to tell you. Right? Because first of all, not only is it dysfunctional and violating, but it's also homosexual. Now, I have not seen this brother, you know, parade around wearing rainbow colors or even having a boyfriend. But that doesn't mean the sexual experimentation of a boy on boy didn't happen when they were young. We're talking about, we're talking about like 5 and 7, something like that. 5, 7, 8, like that. Anyway, like I said, you know, this is something I never knew what was going on until it was actually told to me. You know, even the sexual assault of my baby sister, she knows or doesn't know that when she was 2 years old, she was raped. You know, this is our society, right? Like I said, you know, all of these women out here who are being penetrated, you know, sexually by these men, you know, that have no intentions on marrying them, have no intentions on taking care of them, and yet they're demanding, you know, a contract of possessiveness that's similar to that of a wife or being married. I'm totally against it. I want it to stop now because it's very destructive on the family unit. All right, let me get out here and walk. I'm here.